हेलो फ्रेंड्स, कैसे हो आप लोग। वेलकम बैक। माई सेल्फ पुष्पेंद्र सिंह एंड वी आर गोइंग टू स्टार्ट आवर डेली करंट अफेयर्स फॉर 30th June 2021 and these classes or these video lectures are basically useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination which is conducted by the UPSC. Okay, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first news is all about the Pradhan Mantri formalization of the Micro Foods Processing Enterprise Scheme. That is, in short, is also known as the PMFME scheme. Okay, so recently this scheme has completed the 1 year since its inception, right? So this scheme was launched under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. So that has marked the completion of its 1 year. That scheme was launched by the Ministry of Food and Enterprise, right? So here this is the central sponsored scheme that we are talking about, and it has recently been completed 1 year. So it's a central sponsored scheme, right? The main purpose of this scheme is to enhance the competitiveness of the micro, small and medium enterprises, right? Either those industries or those micro enterprises which are already existing, right, which are there in the unorganized sector in the food processing industries, because in India, the share of this food processing sector, specifically in the world, is very minimal. So idea is to enhance the employment opportunities with the respect to these micro enterprises, specifically in rural urban settings, as well as to increase the processing of the food products specifically from our country. So this scheme that we are talking basically have, the assistance that will be provided to around 2 lakh micro food processing units, right? And this scheme is basically, as you know, that's a central sponsor scheme. Its main aim is to enhance the competitiveness of existing micro enterprises. So it's very important, specifically for the unorganized sector of the food processing industry, right? So it's mainly focusing on the unorganized sector. First of all, that is the most important aspect. Okay, so that means it will basically help in the formalization of, right, of this sector, specifically those micro food processing industries. So definitely it aims to promote the formalization of this sector, and that will provide the support to the farmers producers organization. So how will that, that support will be provided? That support will be provided through the farmers producers organization, right? The self-help group that are also set up in the rural settings, as well as you will have also the producers cooperatives, right? With that, the help will be provided to those micro food processing units. And it's very important that the major component of the scheme is one district one product scheme. What is that? Under this one district one product component of this, that scheme, right, the Ministry of Food Processing and Industries basically approved, right, around 137 unique products, right? So around 137 unique products have been approved, and here the GIS, that GIF one district one product digital map of India have been launched for the purpose of this unique product, okay, to provide the details of, the one district one product, to all states and the union territory. So here the digital map which have been launched by the Ministry of Food Processing and Industries, right, indicates the tribal population, right, the tribal districts, the scheduled caste districts where the scheduled caste or scheduled tribe population is at majority. So it will definitely enable, the stakeholders, or specifically the tribal people or the rural people, right, to make, the best effort in the food processing sector, specifically to those micro food processing industries, right? And it's a very important scheme with that aspect. Okay, next, the Russia has recently begun the construction of the 5th nuclear power plant at the Kundankulam. Okay, the Kundankulam is basically a town in the Tiruvallani district of Tamil Nadu. So Russia has recently started, right, the construction of the 5th nuclear power plant at the Kundankulam, which is basically located at the Tirunelveli district of Tamil Nadu. Okay, now the Russia, which is basically going to build, this is, the India's first light water reactor. So this will be the light water reactor, and the India and Russia basically started talking for the construction of this units of the nuclear power plant at the same site, right, that was basically, already constructed some sort of a units, right? And that agreement was basically signed in June 2017, and that was basically related to, the 5 and the 6 units that were basically supposed to be conducted in that locate in that location. So Rosatom, which is a Russian company, is providing the technology to construct the Kundankulam plant, specifically at Tirunelveli district. So this plant has 6 units, and each unit will be consisting of the 1000 megawatt of generation capacity, and it will be the largest nuclear power plant with that respect, and it will be located in the Kundankulam town in basically in the Tirunelveli district of Tamil Nadu. About the Kundankulam nuclear power plant, as you know, that is the largest nuclear power plant in India. Okay, but it faced several delays, as you have seen in the newspapers also. Lot of protests have been came out from the local people, from the basically villagers. So here currently this Kundankulam nuclear power plant, or the KKNPP, right, which is basically have scheduled to have the 6 reactors, right. All of these reactors basically are going to build with the collaboration of the Russian state company, or Rosatom, which is a Russian company, right. And it is also, you know, built with the help of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, which is basically government of India's undertaking. So reactors have the installed capacity of around 6000 megawatt of electricity, right, and which is currently been, few units have been currently been operationalized with that respect. Okay, next you have the ICC, you know, the men's T20 World Cup 2020-2021 will be held in the UAE this year. So as you know that because of the COVID situations, right, because of the COVID situations, now, you know, this event have been postponed, right. Now the ICC have decided, or the board of control of the cricket in India have decided to hold this event, right, in the basically in the UAE as well as in the Oman. So here the BCCI will remain, you know, the host of the event, despite of having this shifting of this location to the UAE. So here the normally this event is basically slated to be held in India, but now it is shifted to the UAE because of the COVID situations in India. So here it will be, you know, the most important aspect, and it will inform the International Cricket Council with that regard. So here the BCCI will remain the host for the event even in the UAE for that purpose, and it will be held in the Dubai International Stadium, okay, as well as it will also be held in the Sheikh Zayed Stadium in Abu Dhabi, right, in Abu Dhabi, as well as it will also be held in the Sharjah Stadium and the Oman Cricket Academy, okay, which are basically located in Oman. So these, you know, on the ICC T20 World Cup specifically will be held in this 4 locations specifically for that purpose. Okay, next, the International Day of Parliamentarian. Recently the June 30th basically has observed globally as the International Day of Parliamentarian, right. The main purpose of celebrating this day is to review the progress which are made by the parliaments around the world, right, whether some sort of a goals which have been supposed to be achieved, right, with the help of this representative systems, or representative, you know, the system which we call as a parliament, right. So here the carrying out some sort of a self assessment in the parliamentarism, right, and as well as to increase the proportion of the female member of parliament, or the female parliamentarian, right, specifically, right, as you know, the share of the females specifically as a member of the parliament is very insignificant in our country, right, as well as adapting of the new technologies in the basically in the functioning of the parliament, right. So their day is basically established in 2018, right, through the United Nations General Assembly resolution. So it's basically a third day that is going to be celebrated, okay, since 2018, and it basically acknowledges the formation of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, that is basically the global organization of the parliament that was basically established in way back in 1889, right. So it's a very important day for all over the parliament throughout the world, right, to celebrate the day for commemorating the achievements that we have made, either in some sort of a making of self-assessment, what we have done so far in the system called parliament, right, whether we have increased, you know, the proportion of the women or proportion of the female member of parliaments in the basically in the system called parliament in that respect. Okay, next, the International Asteroid Day. So the International Asteroid Day is also observed on the 30th June every year. So this day basically aims to raise the public awareness about the asteroid impact, that is basically some sort of a hazardous impact, right, as well as to basically inform the people, to make aware about the people about the crisis that basically occurred either in the communication systems that will be taken at the global level, right, because of some sort of a near earth object threat, that is because of these asteroids that may happen. Okay, so in December 2016, okay, the United Nations General Assembly basically adopted a resolution which declared the June 30th basically as an International Asteroid Day, right. It's very, very important to observe every year, right, at the international level, the anniversary of the asteroid impact over the Siberia that was occurred on the 30th June 1908, right. There some sort of impact was there on the Siberia to boost some sort of a public awareness about the asteroid impact hazard. That is the most important aspect, the asteroid impact hazard. Okay, so what is this asteroid and why we are concerning about their hazard? So asteroids are basically the small rocky bodies or rocky materials or fragments, right, that basically orbits around the sun. Okay, so mostly they are found between the orbits of the Mars and Jupiter, right. These are basically the planets in our solar system, but some of them have the eccentric orbits for that, and so we can say that the asteroids are basically the rocky metallic objects, right, which may have various range in their size, right, which may have the dimensions just like a pebbles to around 600 miles across. So they are so small that they are not considered as a planet, but they orbit around the sun. So they are known as the leftover materials of our solar system when our solar system was basically built. Okay, next you have the Etat-e-Dua. What is that? Here recently the Union Minister of Law and Justice Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad have basically launched, right, the e-filing portal, which is also known as the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal Etat-e-Dua, right, which is nothing but the e-filing portal for the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, right. It is basically launched in New Delhi. So this newly developed the e-filing portal would enable the parties or the stakeholders to file their appeal, right, with respect to the income tax the decisions, as well as they are also able to file some sort of applications, documents, the paper books, etc. electronically without needing to reach to the office or without needing, right, to go to the office physically for that purpose. So it's very, very important, and this portal will enable the online filing of the appeals application and etc., right. And this would not only results in economization of the use of the paper, because lot of the papers will be saved, and ultimately there will be also cost saving, right, but also it will also help in the rationalization of the fixation of the cases, right, which will also enable us to the quickly disposal of these cases which are long pending in the income tax this appellate tribunal. So this e-filing portal will enable the parties to file their appeals electronically in that respect, and all communications regarding their appeals, right, like filing of appeals or the hearing date or adjournment or pronouncement or disposal, whatever you can say, that everything will be sent to the appellant's mobile or email ID electronically with the help of this portal, right. And here the tribunal's orders will also be sent to the registered email ID or to the registered mobile number to that respect. So this ITAT or the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, right, this e-filing portal will be a next phase, the enhancement with specifically the paperless benches, which basically enable the stakeholders to file their appeals electronically with that aspect. Okay, so it will be very, very important transformation in the countries which is currently undergoing through this digital medium in our country, right. And it's very, very important. So it will basically aims to enhance the accessibility, accountability and transparency in day-to-day functioning of this Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, right. So he is basically our Honorable Minister Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad. Okay, next you have One Nation One Ration Card. So here, right, it's basically a scheme which was implemented by the government of India. So here Supreme Court basically directed all the states and the union territories to implement One Nation One Ration Card system, right. So recently few states have not been implemented this system. So the Supreme Court has directed all the states and the union territory to immediately implement this One Nation One Ration Card scheme, right. That will basically provide some sort of a inter and intra-state portability with respect to that ration card. So it's very, very important. For instance, the migrants workers are there, right? These migrant workers basically face lot of problems with respect to the accessing of this ration, or with respect to accessing of that grains from the states. So it's very important that these migrant workers will be able to access the PDS, or the public distribution system benefit, anywhere in the country, right? Wherever he or she may have gone for the work for that purpose. Okay, so it's very important. A person can buy food grains, as per his entitlement under the National Food Security Act, right? This is a very important aspect. Okay, and wherever his family members, or he himself or she is based for that purpose. So it's basically it will also reform the archaic public distribution system, which is basically currently having lot of leakages problem, lot of corruption issues, right? And the government of India has provided a lot of incentivize, right, to the states to adopt this one nation one ration card scheme. So it will basically enable the migrants workers to basically cope up the problems that they are facing, specifically for getting the subsidized food or subsidized gain from this public distribution system under National Food Security Act. Okay, so here this system basically runs, which is based on the technology which involve the details of the beneficiaries, right, the ration card, Aadhaar number, and electronic point of scale. So it's very important, and this system runs with the support of the two portal, that is integrated management of the public distribution system, that is the one portal, okay, which have been launched by the government of India, as well as you will have the second system, that is the Ann Vitran, right, which is also a postal portal, which also hosts all the relevant data. So it's very important that the beneficiaries names, their the account details have been put over there. Okay, so whenever a ration card holder goes to a fair price shop, right, he will identify himself through this biometric authentication on this electronic point of scale machines, right, which will match real time the details of the beneficiary on this this Ann Vitran portal, right? And once the ration card details are verified, for that purpose the dealers basically hand out the beneficiary entitlement anywhere in any part of the country. So this Ann Vitran portal, right, which maintains a record of this intra-state transactions, as well as the intra-district transactions or the movement, right? Here this portal, which is also known as the integrated management of the public distribution system, this portal basically records the interstate transaction, right? So this is mainly for the interstate transactions, and this Ann Vitran is basically maintained for basically your intrastate or inter-district or intra-district. That means it is for within the state, right, and it is basically across the state. It's very important, right? And it's basically through biometric authentication, through electronic point of scale systems. And here the most important aspect is that under the Food Security Act, which was passed in 2013, around 80 crore people will be entitled to buy any subsidized food grains, which will basically at the rate of, or the subsidized rate of, around 3 rupees per kg for the rice, 2 rupees per kg for the wheat, okay, and 1 rupees per kg for the coarse grains, right? Definitely through designed fair price shops. So here around 5.46 lakh the fair price shops have been basically functioning across the country, and around 23.63 crore ration card holders are there across the country for that purpose. Okay, here each National Food Security Act ration card holder is assigned to have some sort of a fair price shop nearby place wherever its ration card is basically registered, and he is entitled to get the benefit from that purpose. So it's more important is that the traditional system or the PDS system basically was not able to cater the needs of these migrants workers. So this migrants worker will not be able to get access to those subsidized field, and that is what the government of India basically emphasized this one nation one ration card scheme, so that the access to the benefits will be provided through this fair price shop across the country. So idea is to reform this PDS system in our country, right, which was basically have some sort of a problems like inefficiency, the leakages, the corruptions, right, and it was basically initially was implemented, and so basically become a boon for the migrant workers, specifically for that aspect. Okay, and it's very important for that purpose. And here the most important aspect is that why the Supreme Court have asked the states, all the states, to implement that, because currently the four states have yet to join this scheme. These four states are basically the Assam, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, and West Bengal. These 4 states have not joined this One Nation One Ration Card scheme. Only 32 states and the Union Territory have joined this One Nation One Ration Card scheme, covering around 69 crore the National Food Security Act beneficiary for that purpose. Right? For example, you can say that Delhi is yet to start the use of the electronic point of sale machines, right, in the fair price shops, right, which is the most prerequisite for the implementation of One Nation One Ration Card scheme. Right? For example, you can take an example of the West Bengal. The state government has already demanded that the non-food security ration card holders, right, which are basically the ration card which are issued by the state government, right, should also be covered under this One Nation One Ration Card scheme, which the government of India has not accepted. So lot of issues are there with the states, right, with respect to those beneficiaries. So here the Supreme Court have recently directed all the states to immediately implement that scheme, right, for that purpose. Okay. Next, you have the Niti Aayog releases the study on the not-for-profit hospital model. So here the most important aspect is that the Niti Aayog had released a comprehensive study on the not-for-profit hospital model in our country. Right? It's a very good step to for closing the information gap, which is basically related to the institutions as well as facilitating the robust policy making in that purpose. So now let us understand what is this the non-for-profit hospital model. So here the non-for-profit hospital sector have been in the reputation which provides some sort of affordable and the efficient healthcare services for many years to the people. So this sector basically provides not only the curative healthcare, but also it also provides the preventive healthcare services, and it basically links this healthcare system with the social reform. So definitely it will also engage with the community and the educating the community members with that respect. These non-for-profit hospitals basically utilize the resources and the grants which are provided to them by the government of India or by the state government, so that they could provide the cost effective this curative healthcare services, the preventive healthcare services to the population without being over concerned about the profits, right? So they're not concerning about the profits for the purpose. Okay, but however these sectors basically remains largely understudied, right, because there is a lack of awareness about those non-for-profit hospitals, because lot of services are basically not in the public domain because of less awareness in that sector. So here you could understand that the report further revealed that these non-for-profit hospitals basically account for only 1.1% of the treated ailments as of June 2018. That's very less, right? The report further says that these non-for-profit hospitals account for only 55.3% of the inpatients, right? As well as these hospitals account only for the 2.7% of the inpatient for that purpose. Okay. Now you can say that this is basically that approximately the 20%, you can say that the doctors basically charges lesser amount of fee in that basically in that hospitals, right? And here the charges are somewhat lesser than the other hospitals which we are basically charging for that purpose. It's a very significant step. And why the Niti Aayog have been providing this comprehensive study? Because categorization of this prominent not-for-profit hospitals is based on the premises that these services can be provided efficiently, right? And understanding this business model that is basically provided by these not-for-profit hospitals, right, the financial viability of these hospitals can also be enhanced, and it also depends on the donations and the grants which can also be provided for that purpose. Okay, so definitely the recommendation for this policy intervention to promote this sector was basically initiated by the Niti Aayog for that purpose. And why we need such sectors? Because very important, because they need relatively low investment for that purpose, for their expansion of the healthcare services in the private domain. So very less investment, right? And this not-for-profit hospitals basically provide the curative services, the preventive healthcare services, various services to the public, and it also links the healthcare sector with the social reform, the community engagement, spreading the awareness, right, in the society for that purpose. Okay, and here these categories of the such hospitals basically are grouped under the 4 categories, that is the faith-based hospitals, the community-based hospitals, the cooperative hospitals, and the private trust hospitals. So it's based on these 4 categories of the hospitals. Next, the glacial lake atlas for the river Ganga basin. So here the Ministry of Jal Shakti, Government of India, have released the glacial lake atlas of the river Ganga basin, right? So what is that glacial lake atlas? So this atlas, which have the comprehensive database or comprehensive inventories regarding the glacial lakes, which are basically a part of the Ganga river basin. Okay, and since the Ganga has origin from the foothills of the Himalaya, covering around 2,47,109 square kilometers. So they basically, the atlas provides the steady portion of the Ganga river basin, which basically covers a part of India as well as some of the transboundary region. So this atlas is available on the National Hydrology Project, okay, or the National Hydrology Project, the Bhuvan portal, okay, with the Ministry of Jal Shakti under Government of India, right? And this portal or this atlas can be used by water resources professionals, by the scientists, by the researchers, by the disaster management authorities, right, by other stakeholders, right, so that these glacial lakes can be regulated, because lot of adverse effects are there, because you might have seen also in the Uttarakhand flash floods, in the Jammu and Kashmir flash floods that may occur because of this outburst of this glacial lakes, specifically in the upper reaches of the Himalaya. So this would be a very important source for for the disaster management officials, specifically for the mitigation of the disasters. Okay, and the utility of that atlas is very, very high. So it provides some sort of a comprehensive and systematic database related to this glacial lakes in the Ganga basin, that is basically in the size of around 0.25 hectares. So this provide basically, or this atlas provide an authentic database for regular and periodic changes in this basically glacial lakes, whether they are expanding or whether they are sinking, right, with that respect, right? So this will provide the data, right, regarding this glacial lakes for for the basically scientists regarding their retreat, regarding their climate impacting studies, right, with that respect. So this information of this glacial lakes, right, provided like the hydrological topographical information, right, potential critical those glacial lakes which can outburst at any point of the time and which can basically bring some sort of a risk or hazard to the human population. So here the central and as well as the state disaster management authorities basically can use this data for the purpose of the disaster mitigation planning, some sort of a related planning for that purpose, and it's very, very important as a reference data for carrying out some sort of a changes in this the plans for that purpose. Okay. Next you have the NetTracks, that is the Asia's longest and the world 5th longest the high speed track, right? So here very, very important, right, that the Ministry of Heavy Industries and the public enterprises have launched this high speed track in the Indore, that is around 11.3 kilometers long, which is also known as the NetTracks, which is a high speed track, right, which is the longest track in the Asia with that high speed, right? So here the NetTracks is basically developed in an area of around 1000 acres of the land, right? It's a one-step solution, right, for all high speed performance tests, right, that can be conducted, right, over the widest categories of the vehicles, that is basically from 2 vehicles or even the heavy trailers, right, for that purpose. So for the testing purpose, this high speed track basically, which was commissioned or which was constructed at this 11.3 kilometers of this stretch. So this stretch have the multiple the test capabilities, right? These multiple test capabilities, like the measurement of this maximum speed of these vehicles, the acceleration of those vehicles, the constant fuel consumption of that vehicles, right? So it can also conduct some sort of an emission test over this NetTracks or this high speed test, the track, and it will also check some sort of the real road driving simulation on this track. So it will also providing some sort of evaluations, right, during the maneuvering of those vehicles on the road, right, while some sort of a lane change or the high speed durability testing can also be performed over this the high speed track. So it will be very important, a center of excellence for the vehicle dynamics for that purpose. Okay. And as the vehicle can achieve the maximum speed of around 375 kilometers per hour, right? It's very, very important, right, for the vehicles, right, specifically on the curves, right? And it will also check some sort of a steering control, right? So that it could be, it could also help in the designing of those vehicles in a more efficient way. So it's a one-stop solution for all high-speed performance test, which is one of the largest in the world, right? And it is basically cater to the widest category of the vehicles, whether it is a two-wheeler or three-wheeler, or to the wheeler trailers for that purpose. And it will be located in the Indore in the Madhya Pradesh, as you know that. And it will be developed for the all other high speed the vehicles testing for that purpose. For example, it will be using the maximum speed capability of high-end cars like BMW, Mercedes, the Audi, Ferrari, Lamborghini, the Tesla, and etc. Whatever you want to conduct your test for that purpose. So it's very, very important, the high speed track. So you can see this 11.3 kilometers high speed track which have been constructed at Indore in the Madhya Pradesh for that purpose, for the testing. Okay, next, the Moderna have launched or have got the license for the vaccine. So here the drug regulator, that is Drug Controller General of India, have allowed the Mumbai based pharmaceutical company Cipla to import the COVID-19 vaccine which belongs to the Moderna for the restrictive emergency use in our country. So this Moderna vaccine will be going to have the fourth COVID-19 vaccine which will be available in our country, right? As you know that already 3 vaccines are already available in our country. That is, first is Covaxin, Covishield, Sputnik from Russia, and this will be the 4th vaccine, right? That is basically the Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. So briefly I will give you a brief input about this Covaxin. Okay, so first let us understand about the Covaxin. So Covaxin is basically an inactivated vaccine. It's an activated vaccine. It has been made with the coronavirus after killing them. That is what it is called, inactivated vaccine. So it's a safe to inject into the body, and it was created and it was manufactured by the Bharat Biotech, right? As you know that the Bharat Biotech, which is a which is basically India's multinational manufacturer for that purpose. Okay, here the immune cells in the body have ability to recognize this dead virus after it has been injected. So it prompts some sort of the immune system to produce some sort of antibodies against this coronavirus. The second is basically the Covishield, which is basically about the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which is also known as the Covishield. So this vaccine is basically locally manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. Okay, and it was created using some sort of a weakened variant of the common virus, right? And this virus has been altered to resemble the coronavirus, which will boost the immune system in the people in which it has been injected, and that is why it will basically produce the antibodies in the person. Okay, the third is basically Sputnik, that is basically created by the Gamaleya Institute in Russia. Okay, and it is basically composed of the harmless cold type of virus which will act as a carrier, right? And it will be delivered in a small portion of the coronavirus in the body, and that body will start to manufacture the antibodies which are specifically adapted to the coronavirus for that purpose, after definitely you have been vaccinated. And the last is basically this Moderna. This Moderna method of creating this vaccine, right, is based on the messenger mRNA or messenger RNA, that is also known as mRNA. So here the mRNA help in the cells to generate some sort of immunity against the coronavirus, and this vaccine along with the Pfizer is basically preferred among some of the wealthy countries like USA, Canada, Mexico, and etc. So they have more than 90% of the efficacy in preventing of coronavirus. So it's based on this messenger mRNA. Okay, next you have the SEBI. The SEBI basically amend the norms for the independent directors. So here the Security and Exchange Board of India have cleared some sort of amendment to the SEBI, right, which is basically related to the listing obligations and the disclosure requirement of of some sort of independent directors, right, with respect to their regulatory provisions. So yes, very, very important is that to boost the corporate governance between the listed companies, right, the SEBI have approved this amendment to the rules, right, regarding the appointment, reappointment, and removal of those independent directors. So it will also amended the rules that require to disclose the resignation letters to such individuals. So it's very, very important So under this amended rules, right, what you can have is that the 1 year cooling period will be given for an independent director that is basically transitioning through the whole time director in the same company. Okay, and it's very important that this cooling period is to be provided, right, and to the promoters group. So the process will be followed by the nomination, or by some sort of the remuneration committee, right, which will be constructed for that purpose, and it is basically selecting candidate for the appointment as independent directors. So it's more important is that the nomination and the remuneration committee, that nomination and remuneration committee would basically selecting this candidate for the purpose of appointment as a independent director. That process should be very transparent. So here most important is that this nomination and remuneration committee required to disclose some sort of a skills which is required for the purpose of appointment as a independent director, right, as now proposed under this rules. So composition of this NRC is very important, that it also include some sort of a 2/3 independent directors instead of current requirement of the majority of independent directors. So it has reduced, right, from the majority of independent directors to just 2/3 of independent directors. So definitely it will basically regulate the appointment, reappointment and removal of the independent directors with a special resolution which is passed by the shareholders with the help of this nomination and the remuneration committee. And so under these rules, resident Indians fund managers have been allowed to constitute with foreign portfolio investors, right, and that will provide some sort of an option related to the investment with a minimum amount that has been prescribed by the SEBI for that purpose. So here presently the investment of around 1% of the amount which have been raised, right, in the new fund offer, right, or that amount of around 50 lakh whichever is required to be raised, right, for that purpose. And it's very important for the accredited investors, right, which are basically either individuals or the family trust or partnership firms or the sole proprietor for that purpose. Okay, next, the China certified the malaria free. Recently the World Health Organization have certified the China as the malaria free country on the June 30th, right, and it was basically a 70-year effort of the China to eradicate the mosquito-borne disease from the country completely. So China reported around 30 million cases of the malaria annually in 1940s, you can understand, but no such individual cases or indigenous cases have been reported in the 4 consecutive years in the China. So that is a huge progress in the China. So here to get this status, the nations must have achieved at least this status of having 0 indigenous cases with respect to the malaria in at least the 3 consecutive years, right. So here the WHO certification, they can apply for that purpose for getting this malaria free status. So here to get this status, the nations must prevent the rigorous the evidences as well as demonstrate some sort of a capacity to prevent the transmission of the re-emerging of this any sort of a disease in the country in order to get this certificate from the WHO. So have the China have become the 4th territory, right, or the 4th country to get the malaria free status by the WHO. The 4 other countries have also got this status recently, that is El Salvador, right, in 2021. The El Salvador is a country which have got this malaria free status. Then Algeria as well as Argentina, both have got the malaria free status in basically 2019 from WHO. And then you have the Paraguay and Uzbekistan. These both countries have got in 2018 the malaria free status from the WHO. And China has become the first country in the Western Pacific, right, region specifically to award this malaria free certification, right, and it's a very important development for the country. In other countries, for example in the Pacific region, you have the Australia which have got this certificate in 1981 itself, long back. Singapore have already got this certificate in 1982. The Brunei have already got in 1987. So you can consider the situation of India, right, where this malaria borne disease or this mosquito borne disease is very rampant, right. So lakhs of cases every year have been found with respect to this malaria. So we should be more cautious about containing this the malaria disease in our country for that purpose. So that's all for today. We'll meet again tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you.